So, good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Tushar and the entire organizing team for having me here. This session is sponsored by AstraZeneca. So, thanks to the AstraZeneca team too for giving me this opportunity. This session is in two parts. First, I'll be having a talk on PARP inhibitors for PARP-dependent tumors, and this will be followed by a panel discussion on the same topic. So I'll go through the following heads. A look at PARP inhibitors, whether they are all the same. Then the role of Lynparza, that is olaparib in ovarian cancer. Then olaparib in prostate, pancreatic and breast cancer. But the major focus will be on in ovarian cancer. So there remains a significant unmet need for newly diagnosed advanced ovarian cancer patients. When we have a stage 3 or 4 ovarian cancer patient, we have treatments with platinum-based chemotherapy with or without bevacizumab, which gives us a median progression-free survival of around 10 to 18 months. After that, around 70% of these females will relapse within the next 3 years of treatment. And ultimately, only 38% of the patients are alive at 5 years. So there is a significant need for better frontline treatment to improve the outcome for women with ovarian cancer. This graph shows the typical natural history of a patient with ovarian cancer. These patients receive multiple lines of chemotherapy, which are associated with cumulative toxicity and decreasing periods of remissions with each relapse. But targeted therapies have revolutionized the ovarian cancer management in the last decade. In the early part of the decade, we had bevacizumab, which showed benefit in the maintenance as well as in the relapsed and refractory platinum settings. This is followed by more recently with the PARP inhibitors, which have shown a larger benefit in similar settings. So we have now 3 different PARP inhibitors, which have been approved by the US FDA. Each has its own specific indication and individual toxicity profile. Looking at olaparib, there are 4 indications for olaparib. It is approved in the first-line maintenance therapy for advanced ovarian cancer patients who have response to platinum-based chemotherapy and who have a BRCA mutation. It is also approved in combination with bevacizumab as first-line maintenance in patients who have got a BRCA mutation or genomic instability. In the recurrent setting, it is again approved as a maintenance therapy, switch maintenance therapy after platinum-based chemotherapy in patients who show a response to this therapy, regardless of the BRCA mutation. And in the 4th line and beyond, it is approved for patients with germline BRCA mutations. Niraparib has approval in 3 indications as a first-line maintenance therapy for advanced ovarian cancer who respond to platinum-based chemotherapy, regardless of their BRCA mutation. Niraparib is not approved in combination with bevacizumab. It is approved again in the recurrent setting as a maintenance therapy in patients who respond to their platinum-based chemotherapy, regardless of the BRCA mutation. And it is also approved in the 4th line and beyond treatment for patients with a deleterious BRCA mutation or genomic instability. Rucaparib has approval only in 2 settings. There is no data in the first-line setting, so there is no approval for rucaparib in the first-line maintenance. It is approved in the recurrent setting as a maintenance therapy in patients who respond to their platinum-based chemotherapy, regardless of the BRCA mutation status. And it is approved in the advanced cases, 3rd line and beyond, who have got a BRCA mutation. The pharmacological properties of these PARP inhibitors are different. They are metabolized by different enzymes, as you can see in this table. And olaparib has got a comparatively shorter half-life as compared to the other 2 PARP inhibitors. So PARP inhibitors differ in their terms of biochemical properties. Hence, data cannot be extrapolated from one PARP inhibitor to another. Each PARP inhibitor needs to be assessed based on its approved indication and data. Biochemical properties are not meant to suggest any clinical efficacy. This table again shows that though PARP inhibitors have got the same mechanism of action, they differ from one another. They vary in their PARP trapping and in their pharmacokinetic and metabolism and drug interactions. So olaparib is available as a tablet. The dose is 300 milligrams twice daily. A first dose reduction to 250 milligrams BD is allowed, and a second dose reduction is 200 milligrams BD. The trial which got approval for these drugs in the maintenance setting, olaparib was approved in the first-line maintenance based on the SOLO-1 trial. And in combination with bevacizumab, it was approved based on the PAOLA-1 trial. In the recurrent maintenance setting, the approval was based on SOLO-2 and Study 19. All these trials were published in NEJM. Niraparib was approved in first line based on the PRIMA trial, and it was approved in the recurrent maintenance setting based upon the NOVA trial. These were also published in NEJM. Rucaparib is approved only in the recurrent maintenance setting based on the ARIEL 3 trial, which was published in Lancet. Apart from this, olaparib is approved in other cancers as well, such as the breast cancer, pancreatic, and prostate cancer. And rucaparib has approval in prostate cancer based on the Triton 2 study. Then coming to the doses and dose modifications for these drugs, important point to note is that when you are starting olaparib, you need to modify your dose depending upon the renal status of the patient. If there is moderate renal impairment, that is a clear creatinine clearance between 31 to 50, you have to start with a lower dose of 200 milligrams per BD, 200 milligrams BD. You know that these drugs have got hematological toxicity. So for monitoring, you need a CBC at baseline and monthly thereafter for both olaparib and rucaparib. Niraparib is more myelotoxic as compared to the other two, so it requires a more frequent monitoring. CBC has to be done weekly for the first month, then monthly for the next 11 months, and then periodically as needed. Niraparib also causes hypertension, so blood pressure and heart rate monitoring is also required monthly during the first year, and then periodically. All these drugs, for them, adverse reactions need dose interruption or dose reduction. So these are the results of the first-line maintenance trials in patients with ovarian cancer. The lower two trials, that is the GOG 218 and ICON 7, are for bevacizumab, which showed a hazard ratio of 0.71 and 0.93. And the upper trials are for all the PARP inhibitors, which show a greater benefit in this setting. So the SOLO-1 trial showed that in patients who had a BRCA mutation, the hazard ratio for progression-free survival was 0.30, which was quite significant. The PRIMA trial, which evaluated niraparib in patients with BRCA mutation or homologous recombinant deficiency, it also showed an improvement in PFS with a hazard ratio of 0.43 and a hazard ratio of 0.62 for all comers, based on which it was approved as a first line for all patients. PAOLA-1 was a trial which evaluated combination of olaparib plus bevacizumab as a maintenance therapy, and it showed that it also showed a significant improvement in PFS with hazard ratios of 0.3 for BRCA mutated patients and 0.33 for HRD positive patients, including BRCA mutation. These are the results of PFS for trials in recurrent ovarian setting. Again, the lower three trials are for bevacizumab, either in the platinum sensitive setting or a platinum resistant setting. And the upper trials are for the PARP inhibitors. So the SOLO-2 trial, which evaluated olaparib in the recurrent maintenance setting, showed a significant improvement in PFS with a hazard ratio of 0.3. The NOVA trial, which evaluated rucaparib, also showed a significant improvement with a hazard ratio of 0.27. And the ARIEL 3 trial for rucaparib showed an improvement with a hazard ratio of 0.23. The NOVA and the ARIEL 3 also showed improvement in patients who had got HRD. This is again the same trials in a tabular form. Only study 19 is included here, which was a phase 2 trial in all comers, which showed an improvement in progression-free survival by the investigator with a hazard ratio of 0.35 and by the blinded independent review with a hazard ratio of 0.39. Another important point to note here is the maturity results of the SOLO-2 trial, which has got its final overall survival results, which showed an amazing overall survival of 51 months versus 38 months. So almost a 13-month absolute improvement in the overall survival in the recurrent setting with olaparib. So this is the timeline by which these drugs were approved. So olaparib was approved first in 2014 in the recurrent ovarian cancer setting in germline BRCA mutated patients, followed by rucaparib in the same setting in 2016. This was followed by olaparib, niraparib, and rucaparib as a maintenance treatment in the recurrent platinum-sensitive ovarian cancers in 2017 and 18. Olaparib got its approval as a first-line maintenance in germline or somatic BRCA mutated patients in 2018. And more recently, olaparib with bevacizumab has got a first-line maintenance indication, and as well as niraparib in the first-line maintenance setting for patients with platinum-sensitive ovarian cancer. So this table summarizes all the results. As you can see, olaparib has got ticks in all the columns. So it is approved in all settings for ovarian cancer as well as the other cancers. Niraparib has no approval in cancers besides ovarian cancer, and it is not approved in combination with bevacizumab in the first line. Rucaparib is not approved in the first line maintenance setting. It has got approval in prostate cancer based on the Triton-2 study. And we have a study with talazoparib, which has its approval in the metastatic breast cancer. So this was there is no head-to-head comparison between these PARP inhibitors, but this was a study which looked at the comparative efficacy and tolerability of the PARP inhibitors as maintenance treatment in BRCA mutated patients with platinum-sensitive recurrent ovarian cancers. If you can see the graphs on the right side, the middle one on the right side, comparing olaparib versus rucaparib and olaparib versus niraparib, you can see that olaparib demonstrates a superior safety profile compared with both niraparib and rucaparib, with reduced odds for both the grade more than 3 adverse events as well as treatment interruptions. When rucaparib was compared to niraparib, there is not much of a difference. Maybe rucaparib fares slightly better than niraparib. This is again a poster presentation which was done at SGO in March this year, which shows that the proportion of patients who are persistent and adherent to their treatment is highest with olaparib as compared to niraparib or rucaparib. So there was a 62% persistence and a 80% adherence to olaparib in patients taking this treatment, suggesting that this is a better drug, more safer and tolerated by the patients, and better continued by the patients. On the right side, the forest plot indicates the risk of experiencing any clinical event of interest. And if you look at the top two graphs, you can see that the risk of experiencing any clinical event of interest and hematological clinical event of interest, it is higher with niraparib versus olaparib and with niraparib versus rucaparib. The difference between rucaparib and olaparib was not statistically significant. This is the cross-trial comparison of adverse effects. You can see that in the first-line maintenance setting, in the 3 trials, SOLO-1, PAOLA-1, and PRIMA, there is a higher percentage of patients who experience a grade 3 or 4 adverse event or dose interruption or dose reductions in patients who took niraparib in the PRIMA trial. Similarly, in the recurrent setting, the trials SOLO-2, ARIEL, and NOVA, the dose reductions were higher with rucaparib or niraparib. Hematological toxicity was also more with rucaparib or niraparib, except for anemia, which was more common with olaparib. And there is always a concern of MDS or AML with all these 3 agents. So as far as the ASCO guidelines on PARP inhibitors go, it says that in maintenance therapy, first line, patients with stage 3 or 4 epithelial ovarian cancer with a response to platinum-based chemotherapy offer PARP inhibitors with niraparib to all patients, offer olaparib to patients with BRCA mutation, either tumor or germline. Consider offering olaparib plus bevacizumab to patients with a tumor BRCA mutation and or genomic instability if they have responded to the bevacizumab plus chemotherapy regimen. In the second line maintenance setting, patients who have responded to platinum-based chemotherapy, consider offering single agent PARP inhibitors to patients with no prior PARP inhibitor exposure, regardless of the BRCA mutation status. In the recurrent epithelial ovarian setting, patients who have got a platinum-sensitive disease offer PARP inhibitors if they have no PARP inhibitor exposure earlier and they have got a BRCA mutation or genomic instability. There are other recommendations of not combining PARP inhibitors with chemotherapy, obviously because of the excess myelotoxicity which can be expected. Also, there is no data for combining PARP inhibitors with other targeted agents or immunotherapy, and there is no data for retreating a patient with a PARP inhibitor. So PARP inhibitors are transforming the treatment of our advanced ovarian cancer patients, and olaparib has got a wide range of approval across 4 different types, including ovarian cancer. In the ovarian cancer setting, it has got approval in 3 settings. In the first line, maintenance in patients who have responded to their platinum therapy based on the SOLO-1 as monotherapy and PAOLA-1 in combination with bevacizumab. In the recurrent platinum-sensitive setting, it again has got a indication as a maintenance, switch maintenance based on study 19 and SOLO-2. And in the advanced setting, it has approval based on the study 42. But note that all PARP inhibitors are not probably the same. Their approvals, indications that vary. Their pharmacokinetic properties are not the same. So, and also individual PARP inhibitors have some unique toxicities that require attention and customization to see that your patients continue on this treatment for a long period of time. So this table summarizes all the trials of olaparib. The first 4 are for the ovarian cancer, which we have discussed, and the below 3 are for breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, and prostate cancer. These trials have shown a significant improvement in the PFS of these patients when treated with olaparib. And the breast cancer and prostate cancer patient, trials have shown a numerical improvement in the overall survival of these patients, although it was not statistically significant. Thank you. Laparoscopic total abdominal hysterectomy and left salpingo-oophorectomy at the age of 33 in 1999 for chronic left pelvic pain related to venous congestion. In 2010 March, she presented with right iliac fossa pain. She also has a family history. Her sister had breast cancer at the age of 53. Father had prostate cancer and paternal grandmother had breast cancer. On evaluation, she was found to have an enlarged right ovarian cystic mass on CT scan with no evidence of distant disease. The CA-125 was 133. So she underwent a laparotomy with right salpingo-oophorectomy and omentectomy, and it was resected to zero macroscopic residual. The final histopathology was a stage 3 high-grade serous ovarian cancer, and a germline BRCA was done based on her history and histopathology, but unfortunately the germline BRCA was wild type. So my question is, would you like to do a tumor BRCA testing for this patient? Yes or no? I would like answer from all the panelists.
Yes, sir. I think we should consider germline, somatic mutation also, tumor testing, because few of the mutations can be missed.
So we should consider tumor testing, because if we test only germline, we are going to miss out on the somatic mutations and then we lose the chance to treat. So tumor testing should be the one which should be done. And especially if a patient is affording, I guess nowadays we are having the testing options also that have become very affordable. The cost is really reduced. So tumor testing is what ideally should be preferred.
Right.
Yes.
And Prakash?
Yes, for all stage 3 CORI, BRCA testing should be done. And as there is a first line maintenance option is there and it is approved.
So right. So all the panelists agree that if the germline is negative, you should go ahead with a somatic BRCA test. So then the next question is, what is then the ideal approach when the patient comes to you with a diagnosis? What would you like to do? A germline test, a tumor test, a germline test followed by somatic test, or a tumor test followed by germline test? Yes, Dr. Reshma.
So tumor test only, because if we do it together, the total cost reduces. If we do germline then followed by reflex somatic, the cost in fact increases. So if we can counsel the patient in the first line only that go for a tumor testing, that will be much better. It will even save the cost later also.
Right. Any other opinions from the other panelists? Okay. So since the tumor test identifies both somatic and germline, it is ideal that you go ahead with the somatic test first, so that you can at least go ahead with your treatment decision. Later on, you can go ahead and see whether this is a germline mutation also, because that then has implications in genetic counseling, not only for the patient, but the relatives as well. So in your practice, what are the challenges for not opting for a tumor BRCA testing if you are not doing that? These are the options that you have. Do you face any of these challenges?
Yes. So let's go to the option G, others. As patient may not be affording the treatment, if the mutation come positive, there is no point doing the test. That is the biggest hurdle. I don't think so accessibility in today's world is an issue. So probably the affordability for treatment, PARP inhibitors, the biggest constraint.
Right. Anybody else?
We give option of tumor BRCA testing to all patients. Just patient is usually not opt because of the treatment implications, because it's not affording or cost issues only. And sometimes as treatment patient may not afford, but sometimes relatives want that what is the hereditary in this patient. So they are more towards germline BRCA testing, mainly for sibling issues and all.
Right. So if a patient cannot afford tumor testing, you go ahead with a germline testing at least, so that you can do the genetic counseling and the preventive measures for them. Right. So this is what we have. If you go ahead with a somatic test first, if you go ahead with a germline test first, then there is a chance that you would miss a somatic BRCA mutation in almost 21.7% of patients. Whereas if your somatic BRCA is negative, then most likely your germline BRCA is also negative in 100% of cases. So coming to the second case, a 51-year-old female with abdominal distension, CA 125 was 1050, good performance status, had a family history of metastatic CA breast in mother at the age of 52. She was worked up and found to have high-grade serous ovarian cancer, stage 4B, and a confirmed germline BRCA mutation. She underwent 3 cycles of neoadjuvant chemotherapy with paclitaxel and carboplatin, followed by interval debulking surgery and HIPEC, and achieved the R0 resection, and completed her chemotherapy adjuvant 3 cycles. So what next? What are the options?
Sir, maintenance olaparib can be offered for this patient because germline BRCA mutation is positive. Amongst the option of olaparib and niraparib, first is the duration of treatment, 2 years. Olaparib, I think that is a better option. Regarding the safety profile, as the previous slides you discussed, niraparib, we are not much aware about the safety profiles. Thrombocytopenia is an issue. So definitely I would go with olaparib as an option.
Right. And niraparib we also don't have as of now. So these are the trials which I already discussed. Solo 1 was in the first line maintenance setting where patients were randomized to olaparib or placebo, and olaparib was given for 2 years. If there was no evidence of disease, the treatment was stopped. If the patient had an ongoing partial response, he could continue treatment with olaparib even beyond 2 years. And the primary endpoint was progression-free survival. So median progression survival of 56 months versus 13.8 months with a hazard ratio of 0.33. And the median follow-up was almost 5 years. Not only that, patients who had got a complete response to therapy, there was a significant improvement in the recurrence-free survival as well, with a hazard ratio of 0.37. And the secondary endpoints, that is a PFS2, time to subsequent therapy, and safety was also better in patients who received olaparib. And there was no additional case of MDS or AML reported with an incidence less than 1.5%. And this is the PAOLA-1 trial where olaparib was combined with bevacizumab. And in patients who had got HRD positive, if the HRD positivity included BRCA mutation, the median progression-free survival was 37 versus 17 months with a 19.5 months absolute difference and a hazard ratio of 0.33. In patients who were HRD positive excluding BRCA mutation, they also had a benefit with a median PFS of 28 months versus 16.6 months, an absolute difference of 11.5 months with a hazard ratio of 0.43. Patients with HRD negative did not benefit with this combination. So that is how the first line PARP inhibitor approvals came with olaparib plus bevacizumab in HRD positive patients. Niraparib was approved for all patients and in May 2020 and November 2020. So this patient was started on olaparib as you agreed, and this was started in July 2020. But 2 months down the line, the patient developed grade 3 anemia. So how will you manage anemia in this patient?
Sir, if a patient has grade 3 anemia like in this, less than 8 requiring blood transfusions, or if it is persistent, then 1 dose reduction can be done. We can give 250 BD or 200 BD. If the patient has mild anemia, we can manage with supportive hematinium. So generally that is the way we manage anemia.
Right.
And the common adverse effects are generally fatigue, nausea, and hematological toxicities.
In this patient, even other causes of anemia to be found because the deficiency anemia are also common. And at baseline, I usually do anemia profile if there is less than 10 HB is there. So iron profile, B12, folic acid. If there is a deficiency, we can correct it. And otherwise, if there is a grade 3, we have to interrupt and then restart with lower dose.
So while the patient is on chemotherapy and you know that you're going to start olaparib, you have got time where you can optimize the patient and see that she doesn't develop anemia because of other reasons. So let me ask your experiences. Have you used PARP inhibitors, and what are the common adverse effects that you faced?
I have used in prostate cancer actually, and he was around 89-year-old prostate in CRPC. So BRCA2 was BRCA2 by foundation one was positive on tumor, and as creatinine clearance was less than 50, I started with the lower doses actually with 150 milligram 2-1 tablets, and he is now with 90% decrease in the disease after 8 months of therapy, and in this patient anemia was not a problem
Okay.
till now.
Anybody else has experience?
So hematological toxicities is what I've seen, anemia, neutropenia, but manageable. They are manageable. It's not really much problem with interruption. You can manage the patient overall.
And what was the duration of onset for anemia?
Month, around 3 to 4 weeks after.
3 to 4 months, yes. That is what is known, that the side effects usually appear within 2 months. So this is the summary of first occurrence of the most commonly reported hematological adverse events with olaparib. So as you can see, anemia is usually occurs within 2 months. Neutropenia is also within 2 months. Thrombocytopenia may occur a little late, within 3 months. But all of these hematological adverse events usually recover, and the duration of these adverse events is also small. Anemia, it recovers within 2 months. Neutropenia and thrombocytopenia with less than a month. So if you tide over the initial few months of treatment with these drugs, then the patient usually doesn't face many problems in the later part of the treatment. And as suggested, the treatment is either supportive or dose interruption and dose reduction, depending upon the severity and the time it takes to resolve for these side effects. This is another important graph which shows that patients, almost 70% of patients could manage to continue with a full dose of 300 milligrams BD on olaparib. So these are the frequent side effects: fatigue, nausea, and anemia, which are seen across all the PARP inhibitors. And as we know, niraparib is slightly different as far as safety is concerned. It has got high incidence of severe thrombocytopenia, and it may require dose modification based on the thrombocytopenia, based on the body weight and thrombocytopenia. So if the platelet count drops below 1.5, you have to reduce the dose to 200 milligrams per day. But dose interruptions or dose modifications during maintenance therapy, they can be executed with no decrement in the patient's quality of life, and the patient can continue on this important treatment. So coming to the last case, this is a 52-year-old female with abdominal distension, pain and fatigue. CA-125 was 352. She had got a performance status of 1, no relevant personal or family history. She had a high-grade serous ovarian cancer, FIGO stage 4B, with an adnexal mass and thoracic metastasis. She underwent neoadjuvant chemotherapy, 3 cycles paclitaxel plus carboplatin, an interval debulking surgery with bowel resection, splenectomy, and there was no residual disease. Her somatic BRCA turned out to be a wild type. So what would you do in such a situation?
Complete the testing with HRD testing also.
Sorry?
HRD testing.
HRD testing. Okay. Any other opinion? So right, if the BRCA is negative, you still have an option of giving PARP inhibitors if the HRD turns out to be positive. So that would be your preferred option in this patient. I guess all of you agree. So what are the maintenance options for patients receiving chemotherapy with bevacizumab as NACT or adjuvant CT? Olaparib with bevacizumab, olaparib alone, niraparib, bevacizumab alone, or surveillance?
Olaparib with bevacizumab. First one, sir. Olaparib with
Olaparib
bevacizumab.
with bevacizumab. Anybody else with a difference of opinion? So as of now, we have data only for olaparib with bevacizumab. Niraparib is not indicated in combination with bevacizumab. We don't know exactly what is the benefit with bevacizumab alone when it is compared with olaparib, but that is what the indication is, and that is how we treat our patients. So HRD testing is important. The ESMO guideline also says that testing for genomic instability, that is HRD, is recommended. It identifies a subgroup of women who are BRCA wild type but derive a greater benefit from a PARP inhibitor. So this is the design of the PAOLA-1 trial, which evaluated olaparib plus bevacizumab in the maintenance setting. And it showed an improvement in median progression-free survival in patients with a BRCA mutation, in patients who are HRD positive, including BRCA mutation, but there was no benefit in patients who are HRD negative. And this is the PRIMA trial of niraparib, which showed PFS benefit in patients with HRD positive population. And it also showed an improvement in the overall population as well. Hence, it is indicated irrespective of the BRCA status or the HRD status. This is again the same graph which shows PFS improvement in the frontline ovarian cancer treatment with olaparib plus bevacizumab or niraparib. So to summarize, when we have a patient with an advanced epithelial ovarian cancer, you should test the patient for BRCA, either somatic or germline, depending upon the situation. And if that turns out to be negative, a tumor HRD testing is also indicated. The first decision is whether you treat this patient with an upfront surgery or neoadjuvant chemotherapy. The second decision is whether you want to add bevacizumab to your chemotherapy backbone. If the patient has received chemotherapy during maintenance and the patient has got HRD positive tumor, then a PARP inhibitor is preferred based on the PAOLA-1 trial. If the HRD is negative, you continue bevacizumab based on the GOG and the ICON-7 trials. If bevacizumab was not used in the treatment of this patient, then if the patient has got a BRCA mutation or HRD positive, then you can give olaparib based on the SOLO-1 trial or niraparib based on the PRIMA trial. If the patient is HRD negative, still you can give niraparib as a maintenance therapy in this patient after the completion of chemotherapy.